Hello everyone, how are we doing? So today's video, we're going to be going over the regions of the brain and their function. So this is a pretty exciting one talking about how the brain works and communicates. It's very, very intricate and a lot of it can be very, very detailed. But today since survey, we're just doing a general overview of the regions, their functions, and how they're significant overall. All right, let's get into this. So, like I said, we're going to identify the regions of the brain and explain the functions of each region and how they control our body. Uh, First up are the two hemispheres of the brain. I wish I brought a brain model home with me for the recording here. But so we have the two cerebral hemispheres or the cerebrum right here. So there's a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. These are separated by what's called a longitudinal fissure. So a fissure is a deep slit in the brain. And then there's a fissure here, then also a fissure over here. So those are deeper grooves. But then you see these ridges in here as well, and then these shallow grooves. The ridges are called a gyrus, or plural is a gyri, and then a indent is a sulcus, where plural is a sulci. So we have sulci and a gyri. So these are the grooves and the ridges that are found on the brain. So the brain has all these infoldings on the cortex. So the cerebral cortex is the outer layer of the cerebrum. So if we look at what's going on in the cerebral cortex, then we end up making these different regions. So the first region here, well, there's a central sulcus right here. The central sulcus, like I said, just is a shallow groove, and then you have a gyrus on each side, precentral or postcentral. But that separates two of these lobes. So if you remember the skeletal system, we have different bones on the skull, and they correlate with the lobes that are underneath. So up here, the lobes aren't labeled, but you can see that central sulcus coming down right there. So there's also a structure on here labeled the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is actually the connection between the left and right cerebral hemispheres. So because of this longitudinal fissure, there's no fibers that are connecting each side. So deep in the brain, you have a connection for fibers to travel. They're called commissural fibers to go to the other side. Anyway, let's go through each of these lobes of the brain. So where the frontal bone is, we have the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe, this is kind of your task management executive suite of the brain. Your personality is kind of up here in the prefrontal cortex. A lot of your motor function comes from here that we'll talk about. So your primary motor cortex, your premotor cortex, and your speaking area, and then just your task management executive task are found up here in the frontal lobe. So your personality is in the prefrontal cortex, which is right up here. Remember, we're just talking about the cortex, which is the outer layer of all this. Just to jump ahead here, so this is a frontal section going through the brain. So the cortex is this outer layer of gray matter. Deep to that is a white matter layer. And we'll talk about the significance of that when we get to this image. But I just wanted to highlight what I mean when I say cortex. And then posterior to the frontal lobe, we have two parietal lobes. So there would be a left and a right parietal lobe here. So parietal lobe is where we start getting into the sensory areas, and most of these other lobes here are sensory related. So parietal lobe, somatosensory cortex is found there. So all your general senses. So you touch something, that activates a spot in the parietal lobe. On the back of the brain here, we have the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is where vision is processed. Temporal lobe has a few different functions. One thing that's done there is hearing. And balance is all in the temporal lobe. And then there's also a part of the cortex that's deep right in here. It's not labeled on this image. It's called the insula. And that's where taste, your gustatory center, is found. So I mentioned some of them like motor, sensory areas, taste, and so forth. So I have an image here that kind of goes over all those different areas. So here, your motor areas, like I said, are up here in the frontal lobe. So here's the primary motor cortex. And then here, this calls this the motor association area, or also premotor cortex, it can be called too. So this kind of communicates with this to, I want to say fine tune because that is described a little later, but it kind of coordinates your motor activity. So if you play basketball a lot and take a lot of shots in basketball, you slowly get better, and that's fine tuning this premotor cortex here. Now, it does communicate down here with the cerebellum and some other structures called the basal nuclei, but it coordinates that motor activity. The primary motor cortex then outputs that motor activity out the spinal cord to where it goes. And there's lateralization in the brain. What that means is that the left side of your brain causes the right side to move. So there's a crossover that happens in that motor output. Same thing with your sensory input coming in. Everything on the left side is figured out on the right side. So we have this lateralization. And then we also have a separation of tasks between left and right side of the brain. So typically your brain is left side dominant. And left side dominant is referring to the Broca's area. The Broca's area is where speech is made. So if you have a damage in that Broca's area, you can't talk. So it's usually on the left side, whereas the corresponding right side of the brain is more involved with hand gestures, which I do a lot when I'm here recording. And then back here in the sensory area, just as we're talking about speech, we have what's called the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area is what you're using right now to understand what I'm saying. So that's where you're forming your auditory areas coming in, and you're forming associations with the English that I'm speaking. So if you know other languages and things like that. So if there's damage to that area, you cannot understand spoken language. And also because it works with the Broca's area to then form words and assist in the movement of your tongue and things like that, you can't form any sounds that make any sense. And then so up here then, frontal eye field, that's just movement of the eyes and things like that. So all this is mainly motor function up here. Then we get back to the sensory areas when we get back to the parietal lobe and going to the posterior region. Primary somatosensory cortex right here. That's where you're getting all your general senses coming in, touch, pressure, a bug landing on your arm, things like that. Then there's a sensory association area. So what this means, all these sensory areas typically come with this association area. So you look at someone's face. When you look at someone's face, you might recognize them and know their name. That's because you're forming an association with who that is. Think about touch. You touch your phone. You've touched your phone a lot. You know it's a phone by now. So when you pick it up, you know what you're holding. If your eyes were closed, you'd be able to guess what it is because you have association with the sensation of touch. And that's what we're talking about when we refer to the association areas. The primary somatosensory area, or primary sensory area in general, is just bringing in the signal that those receptors were activated. So we see that a lot. Like down here, the primary visual cortex, and then there's the visual association area that goes along with it. So they work hand in hand with each other. And then over here, primary auditory cortex, and then auditory association area. So that's just like listening to something and then understanding what it means. Or like hearing a dog bark and knowing it's a dog that's barking. So that's a general overview of the functional areas. There's a couple association areas like the limbic system, and the limbic system kind of is part of our emotional brain. So you see a mountain lion walk into your bedroom, you're gonna activate a response where you get alert, excited, and you're ready to defend yourself. Compared to you see a puppy walk into your room, you activate a different emotional response that usually leads to happiness and joy. That's called the limbic system, and it works upon multiple areas of the brain. Your brain's kind of also hardwired to remember the bad. Think of it in terms of evolution. So you're by remembering the bad, it's a protective mechanism. So you remember things that are more harmful or dangerous to you so you can protect yourself. And that works through the limbic system too. So now, if we go deep, we go into what are called the subcortical structure. So deeper subcortical, deep below the cortex here. So here we see an outer layer of gray matter. So these are short little neurons out here. They can communicate with each other. They can like the motor cortex can project down and out, or you can cross over the corpus callosum here and speak to the other side of the brain. But then we also have these other structures. So we have what are called the basal nuclei, which are these structures right here. So it's the caudate, the putamen, and the globus pallidus. Combined, we just refer to these as the basal nuclei. The caudate and the putamen are referred to as the striatum sometimes. These are preventing unwanted motor actions, so they are inhibitory. Parkinson's disease actually affects the basal nuclei and causes the jerky hand movements, arm movements, so the unwanted motor action. So they are fine tuning the motor output. Um, and then we also have the hippocampus and amygdala, not shown on this image really right here, but the hippocampus and amygdala are part for our learning and memory, and also getting more of that emotional response and linked with the limbic system. So amygdala is kind of what's responsible for fear and rage too. So that's a memory function working there, but hippocampus is the big one for memory formation. So, moving on, we go deeper into the brain where we have a structure called the diencephalon. The diencephalon here is made up of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. Here, so right here is the corpus callosum. We have all these fibers running to the other hemisphere. So they'd be coming at you right here. In the middle, then, so we have the brain also has ventricles in it. Ventricles are spaces. So there's the fourth ventricle, third ventricle, and then the two lateral ventricles. And we're not going to go into details on where they are or it's how the cerebral spinal fluid gets around and through the brain. So that's what brings the nutrients and gets the toxins out of the brain. But we would have the ventricles going throughout the brain as well. But first here, back to the diencephalon, we have what's called the thalamus. It's this bilateral egg, and it has a little attachment that separates. So there's a left and right side, and then there's a little bridge called the interthalamic adhesion that attaches to each. The thalamus is the relay station. So all the information coming up, all your sensory information, synapses here, and then radiates out to where it needs to go in the cortex. And then any motor output coming down also relays through the thalamus and then goes down. So it's a major relay station in this thalamus right here. Cerebellum also relays up. Cerebellum's not, I guess it's right, it would be right here. Also relays up through the thalamus and then goes to where it needs to go. So you see, it's a major relay. It's filled with nuclei. So if we erase all my scribbles here, there's all these little nuclei in here, like optic nerve for your vision, comes back, goes through a nuclei called a lateral geniculate nucleus, and then goes back to the occipital lobe. It might have some other branches on it too, but just as an example of what's going on. Then right below the thalamus, so hypo is below the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the boss of your autonomic nervous system, or your ANS. We talked about that before. That's what's happening automatically in your body as your fight or flight response, your rest and digest response. So if you have a fever, this is activating that fever. It's communicating down to your brainstem for regulating your heart rate, respiratory rate, vasomotor tone, and communicating down to the pituitary gland here, which releases a whole bunch of hormones for reproduction, growth hormone, thyroid hormone, just to name a few. So very important part of the brain right here for hormone production. I also mentioned the epithalamus up here. Epithalamus is located back here, and all it really does is helps regulate circadian rhythm, so your biological clock, by releasing a hormone called melatonin, which starts getting released later in the day and is what makes you sleepy. Alrighty, brain is complex, so a little longer video today. So next we get up to the brainstem. So three main parts of the brainstem. We have the midbrain, which is pretty much just the connection up here to the rest of the brain, connects up to the thalamus and so forth. Also, we have what are known as the cerebral peduncles, which are just fiber tracts which hold up the rest of the brain. You can't really see it on this image here. Next up, we have the pons. There's a part of the brainstem which comes out a little bit. You see this little part that extends here. The pons Also important, there's your respiratory control groups found in the pons, and also something known as your reticular activating system. So all your sensory input comes up and gets relayed through the pons here, and your brain is always alert and ready to act. So you don't want to turn off your brain, and this RAS system helps keep the brain sensory areas alert and ready to act, and lets you know your position and so forth. And then we have the medulla oblongata here, and that's a very important part of the brain. Is the primary control of respiration, cardio-exhalatory center, so increasing heart rate, decreasing heart rate, and overall, autonomic regulation. Your brainstem is what keeps you alive for breathing and heart rate, just to name two things. So two quite important areas right there. Then the last structure we have on the brain is found on the back. It looks like a little bush. Cerebellum pretty much literally means little brain. And it's thought of as a little brain on the back right here. So it has, I know this image isn't color coded, but it does have an outer layer of gray matter and white matter here, and it forms like these little branches. These little branches in here, they look like a tree. And they're called arbor vitae, which means life tree. So cerebellum is really important for balance. So when you drink too much alcohol, if you ever have, you have bad balance because the cerebellum, what its main purpose, it does play some role in cognitive function too. Its main purpose, though, is to create your blueprint. So right now, however you're watching this video, let's say you're sitting down at your table. It's sending a blueprint of how you're sitting up to your brain. That way, if you want to reach for a pen, if you want to take a sip of water, like here, I take a sip of my water. I knew my position and it told my primary motor cortex how to reach out and grab my water. Might as well take a sip. So that's the cerebellum. And so it's really important in learning, not learning, in balance and forming. It works with the basal nuclei too to fine tune motor outputs because you don't want to do unwanted motor outputs, or you don't want to pick up that aluminum soda can that's open and use too many motor fibers and crush it. So that is the brain. Pretty intense, and that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to stuff going on in the brain. I didn't tell you everything today, of course, since this section's already long enough, but that's just a general overview here of everything going on in the brain and their functions. Like always, if you have any questions, please let me know. But if not, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.